Check. All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask you to come on up, have a seat. I want to say first off, on behalf of the school district and our school board, and we do intend to have all of our board members here tonight. I know some are running a little delayed, but they will be here as soon as possible. Thank you for being here for our second InSight Community Series. Our first one was held last year at the end of the year at Heron Creek. We started off in South County because we hear our constituents loud and clear. We want more presence down here because we live up there at the district office mainly for our meetings. And so when we get to travel, it's always an opportunity for those who, it could be a barrier to get up there during the heat of the traffic. So glad to see everyone here, some familiar faces as well as some new faces. And hopefully tonight, we'll be covering a range of topics, and our board members will respond as they feel the need to chime in and share their thoughts on things. And I will facilitate as best as we can. So we're going to have more of just kind of a Q&A session, but I want to start off and just tee up the first topic for tonight because it has been, I know a lot of questions have come recently, and I've seen even though I'm not on social media, but I've seen where people have shared with me the topic of school closures and the topic of schools of hope and even the topic of selling the landings. And that kind of all is encapsulated into one broader conversation that we're going to be talking about as a board publicly on Tuesday. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because the board, as you know, is bound by sunshine laws and things of that nature. So when you start to have these conversations, step one has to happen before step two. Step one is planning and looking at data and looking at our current situation and what's happening. For those of you who don't know, there was a lot of legislation passed this last session. And one of the things that came in very, very late under the budget resolution at the end of June was the Schools of Hope legislation. A lot of people were tracking that and thought it had stalled and died, and then right at the end, it came in during the time of the budget in June, so it kind of snuck in there. Well, that all has happened in just recently as a couple of months. So that put our district, one of the things we're very as proactive as possible. When we saw that legislation come through, we began analyzing our current situation in the school district to determine how is it going to impact Sarasota County. So let me give you just a brief example of what the Schools of Hope legislation is. Schools of Hope says, now, if you have any underutilized space in your school district, the potential for a charter school designated by the DOE as a school of hope can come in and co-locate in your school alongside of your traditional school and can also, at the expense of the district, use all of your facilities, your transportation, your food nutrition services, your security protocols. All of that is used and collated with the School of Hope. They can use your common spaces like your cafeterias, your fields, your gymnasiums, your auditoriums. All of that is at their exposure, and the two schools have to coexist. Now, I see a lot of issues potentially with that. So with that, we took a really quick dive into our utilization of our schools. Utilization is basically how many seats do you have available according to your reports that you submit to the DOE, and how many students do you have in your schools. If there are more seats than students, you are at risk. And with the enrollment shifts that have occurred across the nation, if you're watching the news at all right now, Miami down 22,000 kids, Hillsborough down 11, Pasco down 2,000, Osceola down 1,800, Orange County 6,600 kids. If you look across the nation, there is a major decline in shift in enrollment that is occurring. Fortunately for us right now, we are down about 300 students. And when we take that snapshot in October where we submit our enrollment to the state, and what we anticipate will grow from August to October, we believe we're going to be in good shape where we're going to be relatively flat, we believe, because we typically grow from August to October here in Sarasota. So in that terms, we've planned well. But I say all of that is we have experienced declined enrollment over the years, and our schools are underutilized. Many of them are. We have schools that are in the 48% range of utilization. We have schools that are 50, 56% range. They are prime opportunities for schools of hope. So we're analyzing every option of how do we push enrollment up, how do we create innovative programs so parents want to stay and choose our traditional public schools. But also the reality is we have to even explore options like repurposing school buildings and moving kids into different schools to up their utilization. So all of that is going to be discussed at our Tuesday workshop. None of these board members have had these conversations publicly yet because we haven't gotten to that point. But I wanted to at least address that because I've heard a lot about, there's rumors circulating around Wilkinson, is it going to be closing? Are you selling the landings? All of that is encompassed around this conversation around the Schools of Hope. And you will learn more in detail about that on Tuesday. So I don't want to really put the cart before the horse, but I do want to say I recognize that there is rumblings around that, and you will learn more about that on Tuesday. Okay? All right. So we're going to jump right in. Thank you for being here. Mr. Parento, you want to start us off?
Are we on here, Jamal? Superintendent, so you teed that question up perfectly. We have a lot of questions that have already come in from the audience here tonight about Schools of Hope. The first one, what options will families have if they want their children to stay in traditional public schools and not be involved in a School of Hope?
Okay, I'll start with that. So there's still a lot to be worked out as logistics. I would say Sarasota is prime opportunity for Schools of Hope. They would be looking at our district. We're a very high-performing school district, and I can very much see a School of Hope trying to commandeer space in one of our schools. How that would look, obviously, parents have the right to choose their educational options, so they would be able to choose what school, and that goes for all of our schools. We're a district of choice, meaning that parents can choose any school in our district that has that available space. If it is their home school that has that School of Hope, they could obviously not choose the School of Hope and participate on the traditional side of things. But there's going to be a lot of logistics that'll have to be worked out, and there are unknown answers right now in terms of how that will look.
Another question that we received about Schools of Hope, why is the district not lobbying for those state funds to come directly to Sarasota's public schools instead of waiting for them to be siphoned off into a School of Hope operator?
Okay, I think I'll start off and then we'll open it up to the board. I mean, I think we've been pretty clear around our legislative platform about where we stand about protecting public education in our traditional public schools. We have lobbied very hard around the FES scholarship and making that a separate district, and in terms of implementation, how that should be done right and not at the expense of the finances of a school district, and that burden be placed on us, because there are, I think, some inequitable ways of which that's currently being implemented. But I don't think it's going to go backwards. Let's just be real. Do I think the scholarships are going to go away anytime soon? I don't think that's going to be the case until either it fails completely or some other scenario happens. So I think what we need to be doing is really advocating for a fair implementation of the scholarships. I'm going to stop talking and allow anyone else to chime in.
Okay, well, this is one of my favorite topics, so I'd be happy to speak about it. I think our district is working very hard to be a leader in this space and in advocating for our students and our families, because the truth is the vast majority of families continue to choose our public schools. And so the legislature has a responsibility to honor that decision that we make as parents to send our children here. I am personally committed to advocating for appropriate funding for our students and for our teachers. And I think our board has stated multiple times now that they are also committed to advocating for appropriate funding. Maybe not fully funding, but appropriately funding seems to be something we can all get behind, so.
I think for me, I have talked to individual legislatures, and I don't go in on the defense. I try my best to listen to what they have to say and then use logic and hopefully common sense to explain how this will negatively impact our schools. Because I was an employee for 35 years. I love this district. I don't think there's any school out there that can beat any of our traditional public schools. So it's just trying to work with them to have them see some of the ramifications, what they might think seems logical and common sense, but up there, but when you put it in practice, it's not. So just keep trying to talk with them, invite them to come to any of our schools and to see what we have to offer, meet with our superintendent, because honestly, they'll listen to us board members, but they're really going to listen to Mr. Connor because he has a very good reputation up there. And he has all the actual data and everything where he can show and to say, you know, we're not saying we don't want these, but you can't keep pulling all this money away, and you got to see the impact that it really is having on our schools.
I'd like to add in that I know that our legislative platform, our priorities are coming up, and I'm very confident that the board will be supporting what we need in resources and in staffing to continue to provide high-quality education, to continue to grow achievement, which has been this board and the superintendent's focus. I think that Ms. Marinelli said something that's real important. I think that having data to back up where are our challenges, where can we provide information to our local delegates and to the legislature that will benefit our students, our community, and the delegates that represent us as well. I think that we have a good relationship with our legislature and the local representatives, and I think that we'll do a good job with it, confident with that.
No, and I summarize, I think the accuracy of information and implementation is what matters. I think that everyone up here has confidence in the product that we're providing. I think sometimes I love the opportunity to make it better and to be competitive, but I also think it's important that we often say the money should follow the child, but we also want to make sure that what's being cited from a legislative standpoint, the execution of is in fact being implemented to the spirit of that. And that's why I think it's so important to have a good relationship with the legislators to say, listen, we're not here at odds, but we're going to fight for all of the hardworking staff, all of the families, and all of the students, so we have the outcomes that every parent is actually seeking when they're looking at those choices.
I'll just follow that up with from the time that I arrived at the school board, I've seen a momentum from the legislature that has not been in the favor of public education to the point of where we're sitting here today talking about the schools of hope. And that momentum was even before I arrived at the school board. So it's been a slow process up until the actual voucher program went into effect. I will reiterate my personal stance is I believe in choice. I love the choices that we had prior to charter schools for profit. All of the things that I don't need to reiterate. Everyone knows my personal stance of public education, and particularly the Sarasota School District. I'll say it one more time, that what the legislature has done may actually be good ideas in certain districts. There are 67 school districts here in Florida, and in some of those districts, Schools of Hope and all these other things that have been coming at us like a freight train may work. It doesn't work in Sarasota. We're an A district. We are the choice that people want to continue to bring their kids to, because we have and are the best schools in Sarasota County, and I cannot stress that enough. So I am also appreciative of the fact that we have a superintendent who has chops, who isn't afraid to sit down in a logical, data-driven way and explain to legislators why this doesn't work for us, and he's doing an excellent job, and I will stand behind him in those conversations every single day to try and get the legislators to know that they're making a mistake in Sarasota.
So just to bring it home on a real example, one of the things we've advocated strongly is the fact that last year we educated 250 students in our traditional public schools whose family opted for the scholarship and were funded for the scholarship, and we didn't get the funding for actually educating those students. That's a problem, and that has to be recognized, it has to be brought to light, and it has to be rectified moving forward. I can tell you right now, we've already identified those kids this year who are in the same position. And there are 118 students in our school district that are in our classrooms today that are also applicants of the FES scholarship. We're in front of that proactively because the state has heard us on this issue, and they want mechanisms in place to keep this from happening. So before that September disbursement goes out, we should have caught those 118 students to say you should not be getting a disbursement for the FES scholarship because you are sitting in a public school. So there is headway that is being made in those areas. So is there, we want to keep anything on Schools of Hope or vouchers before we move on to our next topic?
Well, the next question kind of ties in nicely right there with Schools of Hope and into school funding. With Sarasota having overwhelming support for public education from the voters in the county, as we head into the legislative session, what's the district's plan to engage the voters and the legislators in an effort to prevent our schools from being defunded, downgraded, or taken over?
I think on a legislative advocacy point, the board, it's not the responsibility of this board as a governing body to advocate positions. So it's not that the board, individuals can do what they want, but as a board, they govern the operations of the school district and the policy of the school district. So in terms of advocacy, there's very strict ways a governing body can even go down that road. Just like when we do our referendum, the board doesn't go and speak on behalf for or against it. Same thing with legislation like that. But there are groups that are probably represented here tonight that do that, and there are people and individuals and community citizens that do that on an advocacy. What we do is we create that legislative platform, and we just work through our lobbyists and our legislator connections and relationships to talk about individual stances or what we have voted as a board, what our priorities are legislatively.
Another question that kind of leads into legislative issues or concerns. Last year, there was a bill that was championed in the legislature that would have altered the grading system for school grades, and that got a lot of movement in the House. It did not get a lot of movement in the Senate and ultimately did not pass. This would kind of change the system that over the glide path that the legislature had would leave only one A-rated school in Sarasota County. Voters want to know what they can do to help and stand with the district in advocating against legislation like this, like they did with the AP, IB, and ACE funding last year.
I'll kick us off. I don't know if you guys want to start off. Or, I know. All right, I'll kick it off. So for those of you who may not know, there was legislation introduced last year that basically set the district and the school grades. Basically 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B, which is different than what the current grade is. Right now, you get 64 or 65% of the points to be considered an A. And I think the logic behind that is to equate that to a student who is typically graded in a classroom on a 100-point scale. 90 to 100 is an A, right? We all know that from being in school and being students. Grading individual student performance is much different than the complexities of grading a school on the components in which are calculated for school grade. So to make that comparison, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense because it's just not an apples to apples comparison. Do I think accountability should exist? Absolutely. It's what makes us better. It helps us improve. It tells us where we are, where we're going. So accountability and those measures, I do think we've got a plan. There is legislation already in effect that when so many schools reach the designation of an A or a B, so I think it's like 70% of schools across the state reach that threshold, then it already triggers an increase to push forward. And it's incremental. It's not moving from 64% A to now you have to reach a 90. That, we've already done the analysis on that. Only Pineview, and we have the lovely principal from Pineview here today, only Pineview would be an A school right now. So we have a lot of A schools, and so to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to jump that drastically, but to push ourselves, yeah, absolutely. That's already in place in the legislation.
I'm going to jump in too and just say I had a really nice conversation today with a board member that is on one of our esteemed foundations here. And he explained to me in passing, just very conversational, his children are homeschooled. And he told me they're homeschooled because you have too much chaos on your board. I hear all this chaos going on about public education and why we needed the and we brought those kids home because we don't want to be part of that. And so, and I hear that all the time from opposition. But here's the reality. That chaos is by design. That chaos is set up to make public education look bad. The grading system that we have is not broken. It's done a very, very good job, particularly for Sarasota, and the bulk of our students and their families, the majority, the vast majority, are happy, and I hear it all the time, especially from grandparents. I sent my kids here, and now my grandparents or my grandkids are going here, and I'm thrilled. I hear that significantly more than from the opposition. But I have to tell you, that grading system and that conversation that we're once again having to defend is part of the chaos to tear down public schools. And don't accept it from your legislatures. Change them.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the politicalization pieces, is that I think it would actually have a huge impact, and we've talked about this, because at the end of the day, you know, I have not spoken with the bill sponsor about this one particularly when it was introduced last session, but in general, I think having the ability to align it in a transparent way, I think all of us associate A grade, B, C, D with what we were familiar with when we were students. I also understand as a board member, it's dramatically different than that because of the calculation. So those two things don't mesh up. The most important thing to me, kind of going back to what I said before, is that intent and then the implementation needs to be mashed up. Like, what are we doing to serve? Because by the way, our legislature, those members, particularly our local delegation, we represent the same areas and we overlap. They're all our taxpayers, they're all our community, they're all our students. And so what is the intent? I think that it's easy to do these fun little zippies about political whatever, but at the end of the day, the pieces that I worry about is both ways. You know, when you say we're an A district, and I've said this to many members of our staff, is we have extraordinary leadership, we have great families, we have a lot of engagement. We are very fortunate to have incredible support that other districts in our state do not have. However, even if you're at A school, you have students that are slipping underneath the cracks. And so it's easy to get caught up in that kind of label. And so what's the intent? I don't know, but I think that that's where you have to have that conversation of what is our full purpose? We're there to serve every student and meet them where they are and not go into all the other. I don't think it's intentional to try to attack public schools. I think it's intended to be transparent this is what the public understands, and so they feel duped, I guess. If you say an A is 60%, well, that's not what they remember an A being, and I think that's a reasonable conversation. I don't think that's anyone being political.
If I could just add to that, I would say that I think the way that we calculate school grades probably does need to be updated. I think that right now, what we see is the strongest correlation between a school grade is actually the economic indicators in the family and in the neighborhood that those schools serve. So is it really a good indicator of student achievement, of student outcomes? I would say we have some work to do there, but to just change the percentile to 90 to 100, 80 to 90 without actually getting to the root of the problem and changing the rubric or changing the way that we calculate those grades doesn't make any sense to me. So that's what I would advocate for.
I'd like to add in that if you look at the pattern of our State Board of Education through the last several decades, they regularly change how school grades are calculated. This isn't new. What I'd like to advocate for and see is to look at our students that aren't meeting the standards of the grade level and to focus in on how we are providing the appropriate data-based proven resources for those students, and look at how our students are performing in correlation to how we're being graded. But as far as changing how we're graded, there's been times in past years and past decades when they've changed that grade when you were about to take the state assessment test, so that's not new. I think how we communicate and what we prioritize, I truly believe they're prioritizing the same thing. It's just a matter of coming together in the best interest of our students. I don't see anyone wanting 95% of our schools be failing. I think that what they're trying to say is they want 95% of our students passing and meeting the standards of the grade level.
I also this morning had a conversation, a beginning conversation with one of our House representatives over this, because I want to get an understanding of where they're coming from, and then I can explain, well, this is the impact. And sometimes, and you know, I'm pretty blunt with my words. Sometimes these are bonehead decisions or conversations. So you try to work through that, and so we're going to be meeting some more to talk about that, and then I will ask Superintendent Connor to meet because he can really get in that and bring that data. But I think it's important to start those conversations, especially with the people that, you know, if they're in the House and it passed the House, it's like, okay, we really need to up this game and have those conversations. So that's what I'm trying to do, to understand why. Just why are you messing with something except to raise the accountability?
Superintendent, we'll take one more question that we've received online before we open it up to questions from the audience here tonight. And this is kind of a two-part question, but we've got this question a couple of times. What is the school district and leaders in our schools doing to study the success in Charlotte County that they're having with sensors in the bathrooms to end vaping? Additionally, Northport needs to also study what Charlotte is doing to successfully get students below a 2.0 in VOTEC to find success.
Great question, great question. We're doing a lot actually on the front with our vaping task force, and I know we've got some DeFi students, it looks like from Northport here, who have been a part of that, and there's lots to do and accomplish, but a lot of planning has gone into last year around how to educate, enforce, and eradicate vaping. Those were the three themes, the three topics that the vaping task force worked heavily on. And we, with the leadership of the chairman of the task force last year, worked directly with Charlotte County Schools, and the one who was over the top of the whole initiative over there around vaping and the sensors, and talked to them at length, extensively, about what was the secret to the success. Surprisingly, it wasn't just the sensors. It's not just the sensors. It really came down to the comprehensive approach around educating students about the dangers of that, educating parents, educating teachers around how students are doing that, because it's pretty sneaky how they can get away with a lot of the vaping these days. It's pretty amazing. And how they're enforcing it through the student code of conduct. So we aligned our student code of conduct to some of those consequences, but then not just for consequences, how do you really educate and move past that to where they're making good choices in life? And so we've created educational videos that are going to be pushed out. We started with a promo at the beginning of this year just about the consequences, so they at least understood, we're very clear about what the consequences are and how it impacts beyond just school. It's really, it can impact their entire life and their health. But there's a lot that has been done, and I would encourage you, since we don't have a lot of time to get into detail, we had a workshop on this a couple of months ago. I can follow up and maybe put on our website, bring that to light. But we spent about 35 minutes sharing with the board all that was accomplished recently with that task force. Let me say this, we're not against the sensors. These are things we are exploring. We are going to do step 1 before we do step 2 and then get to step 3. So the sensors are not off the table. They're not something that are being implemented at scale now. We're looking at pilots. There's things logistically that have to be considered, such as your camera placements and all of that. So all of that, I can reassure you, are being analyzed and planned for in the event that we do roll out the next phase, which would include sensors. Anything else on vaping that you want to add?
I'll add something. I actually had the privilege of seeing these young people, the DeFi students, present their research and what they think might help address the vaping situation. And so I hope that as a board, we will get a chance to hear from them as well, because I was incredibly impressed. And I understand that we have tried vaping sensors in the past, but things have changed. The technology is different now than it was 5 years ago. And so I would encourage this board to keep an open mind about whether or not we can begin to actually pilot that program and to really hear from these young people who have done the work. And I know we had our vaping task force and that we're beginning some of that education work, but I hope we can hear from these folks, because they're remarkable.
I'm going to also acknowledge the DeFi students and all the data that I've seen for the kinds of changes that we're looking for on campus are peer-to-peer led programs. And so there's an example of really empowering our youth to have ideas and suggestions and thoughts about how campuses should work and could work. So again, I thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, Board, in the interest of time, what we're going to do is, I know a lot of people have submitted questions here. We have one more we're going to queue up here. All these questions will be answered on our website on the superintendent's page under the inform as they were written with the response. Because now, after we answer this last question, we're going to go to open questions from the floor, and you raise your hand and we'll come over to you and ask a question. State your name, ask the question.
And the way that we'll do that, we'll do it by topics. So we'll throw out a topic, and then if you have a question related to that, that way we're not ping-ponging back and forth. So if you have a question, let's just say on budget, we'll start with the budget and then allow that, and then we'll switch to a new topic. Does that make sense? Just so we're kind of in the flow of one conversation and not going from vaping to budget to this to that to this to that.
And if you have a question you want it on a card, you can do that too and give it to us, and we will make sure that question's answered. And that was a great tee-up, because the next question is about budget.
Perfect segue, Superintendent Connor. This is from a staff member. As educators, many of us are experiencing the effects of recent budget cuts in a very tangible way, mostly in increased workloads and fewer student supports. This also includes difficulty keeping classrooms running smoothly, working outside their hours, administrators taking on additional responsibilities that takes away their ability to focus on student success. Can you help us understand why these cuts seem to be felt so strongly at the classroom level and how decisions were made about where reductions would occur? Also, what are we doing currently for next year, as I'm sure more cuts may be to come?
Thank you. Yes, it has been quite an active summer. So starting back before, as school got out, and the realities of the budget were being solidified at the legislative level, the projections of enrollment, there's been a lot of factors, and if you haven't had an opportunity to read, which ended up being a 28-page narrative that really kind of reviewed and gave a summary of all of the factors that we're facing as a school district, I highly encourage you to go to our website, go to the Inform page, Inform, and you will see the very first at the top update from July 29th, a very comprehensive review about the current state of budget and the decisions as to why certain positions and how we went about that. Let me also say it started this summer outside all of the resources outside of the classroom. Now, when you say that, it's going to have an impact on the classroom because those supports obviously all are interconnected. There's connectivity from the superintendent all the way down to the lowest level, right? And so anytime you make any adjustments, you're going to feel that. But the goal was to preserve what I believe is the sanctity is making sure first that you have manageable class sizes and the teacher is there. The teacher is not affected. So where did this all start? The first thing was ESSER funding, federal funding, has come to an end. And there's a reality that we were all handed here. There were 182 positions that were funded on federal dollars. That was money that was going to expire. Things such as school-wide behavior coaches, instructional facilitators. I can go on. There's 182 positions across whether it be district level, but mainly at the school level. That was the first thing that had to be looked at because there wasn't a sustainable funding source for that. It's not to say they were not valuable. School-wide behavior coaches, there was a lot of value in having school-wide behavior coaches. But you had to start there as what is on the budget in terms of allocations that is not sustainable. That's where it started. Then you look at other positions and initiatives that if you're prioritizing because of the squeeze and constraints that we're facing financially, we had to make decisions around, okay, if you have literacy coaches, for example, what we did is we said, okay, that's about an $8 million expense across all of our schools to have a literacy coach at every one of our schools. So then we look at, okay, is there a data-based approach that we can take? Some schools are in really dire need, right? Their proficiency in literacy is low. We want to make sure we're supporting, or there's an increased number of new teachers in literacy at a particular school. Looking at the data to drive the decision, because you have some schools who are performing very well above the state average. The data supports that, hey, they're doing okay, and while we don't want to take away resources, it makes sense here. So we used a data-based approach around all of those positions that were non-rostered positions, which means they didn't have students directly tied. They didn't have kids sitting in front of them a class every day. So like the behavior coaches, the literacy coaches, certain interventionists, that all of that outside support. That was the first and second wave that we went through in terms of making those decisions. Then you get to the third wave, which is the fall. The fall adjustment cycle is no different every year. Every year we look at who shows up, cheeks in the seat, they say, right? Who showed up to Woodland Middle School? We thought 1,000 kids would come and only say 900. I'm just saying that as an example. Okay, what we're doing now is we got to shift classroom teacher support to where maybe enrollment has gone up. If, say, Woodland dropped and Venice Middle increased, it's not cutting, it's shifting resources. And that's what we just went through after the first 5 days. So the summers, we made some adjustments and we eliminated most positions were vacant positions overall, which was great. Every person that was affected by their position being cut found a suitable job. If they didn't feel for them it was suitable, then they may not have chosen to stay there, but they had somewhere to land. So no one was technically laid off. And that's an important distinction, because that was a priority of this team, was to say, we're not going to affect the salary of anyone in the district because of these changes. We're going to find a suitable position if there's not one that's comparable to what they're currently doing. And we accomplished that. And we're proud to say that. It has resulted in our financial stability. We will end at above a 12% fund balance for last year. We're projected to be positioned well to have a strong fund balance as we get through the year. But the fact is, we opened up a brand new school this year, K-8. That's a $6 to $8 million expense, depending on what you're calculating. We do have constraints ahead of us with Welland Park opening. That's a high school. It's coming right out in this area. That's going to be another $10 million expense, and we're planning for that. In that process, we've been planning for that as well. So it's not just the constraints of the budget, but it's also forecasting in the future to know what's coming ahead as best we can. So I think we're well positioned. One of the things we did in the fall is we said, we're going to make sure that process is done by Labor Day, which we did, and we only had to move 27 teachers in the entire district out of, 3,000. So we positioned ourselves very well. We were able to take more vacancies off the books because of enrollment. Like I told you, there was a decline in enrollment of about 300, and we just collapsed vacancies where we could do that. And our principals did a good job of preparing for that over the summer by not filling certain positions and making sure they were stacking their classes appropriately. And right now, all of our schools are meeting the class size requirement by average. And if they tend to pop out because, say, enrollment goes up, we will make those adjustments so that we are protecting class size at the average. So we can go on and on about the rationale as to why and what was done, but I highly encourage you to read that narrative on the website to really get a full, deep understanding, because we could spend 2 hours just talking about that.
We'll
Just
stick
gonna
with
add on to that if I can quickly. When the ESSER funds get discussed, realize that that was a year ago that the funding stopped. And so what Mr. Connor and his team have been doing is really shuffling the deck on an ongoing basis from that time period. And we were hit with these additional, if you will, changes in funding from the state. But I love the explanation, because all of that is a rationale with the cards that were dealt. But the reality is, before those cuts, there were plenty of people that were saying, I don't have enough support. That does go on every single day. Before the cuts happened, there wasn't enough support. When I hear that, because I understand the rationale from what Mr. Connor says, I know how hard they worked to make sure no one lost their job, but positions didn't get filled. If all those positions had been filled, we're still going to have teachers saying, I don't have enough support. And you know what? They're right. They don't have enough support. So here's where the problem lies, my friends. We're underfunded. We are at the bottom of the 50 states. We're at the bottom of funding in education. And we can rationalize all day long about how we did the very best that we could with what we were dealt, but we're underfunded to begin with.
Okay, sticking with budget, if someone has a budget, we'll go here first.
Do I hold it? Sure. First of all, thank every one of you for showing up this evening. I appreciate you coming out for a town hall. Heard from
Hello?
Hello? Okay. I've heard from parents and bus drivers alike that the new bus routes are resulting in long bus trips. Students consistently getting to school late and parents having to drive their kids to school to avoid these problems. Furthermore, bus drivers are reporting that they can't speak out about problems they experience without fear of retribution. So my question is, what is the district planning to do to alleviate these concerns and ensure students are having to spend undue excessive amounts of time traveling to and from school? And I believe that was because of budget cuts, so that's how it's related.
Thank you for the question. I would say, yeah, there have been some challenges, and that's why I've got my wonderful team here of transportation in the background. Who's going to take the mic? Who's coming up? What I would tell you is none of that is a result of budget cuts. We didn't touch transportation in terms of cutting routes or cutting buses or bus drivers. So. Yeah, the logistics, Dr. Little can talk a little bit about around some of the routing, but I want to be clear, when we went through these decisions about what was going to be adjusted financially, transportation was preserved. So, go ahead.
Yes, no, thank you for the question. Regarding lengths of ride and things like that, our goal is to always get students to and from their home to their school in less than an hour. That's generally our maximum that we're looking at. In some cases, countywide magnet schools are a little bit longer because our buses have to go maybe from North County to South County, that sort of thing. One of the things that we try to do in general, look at our data, make sure we're being proactive in making adjustments when we notice that a bus is running longer or has some extra students on it. And we encourage our staff actually to bring those forward to us for changes. Anybody who has, who feels like their bus is overloaded can come and see myself, any member of my team. We will look at the data to see. Our goal of that, or just so you guys know, 51 students in a high school is the maximum that we want to put on a bus. If we exceed that, we're going to make adjustments, right? So the question was, we went from over 200 routes to less than 180. Last year we had 195 routes. This year we have 182. Part of that was just to increase the number of capacity that we have on the bus, because we have to have a certain number of students to ride the bus to get the FTE money to do that. So that was part of the effort that we made this year that made that reduction. But we also have a challenge in the beginning of the year sometimes with students who want to ride the bus who maybe didn't initially register for the bus. And as we add them on, then that creates some of those issues where there's more kids on the bus. So as soon as we're aware of that, we start working right away to do leveling and move those around. And we'll add additional routes if we need to at different schools based on where the issues are at.
Really quickly, because I think it's important, because we had this question a lot. So thank you, Dr. Little and Mr. Connor. Just to clear up, because the logistics of busing, especially at the beginning of the year, you can always tell how it goes, because that's usually what we hear most about. We certainly heard about how many people were sitting to a seat, and then that adjustment. But just to be crystal clear, because I got this question pretty regularly, there was no cuts in any way, financially or position-wise, when it comes to transportation.
No, any adjustments that were made were not because there was a financial constraint. Those were made data-based decisions, like he said, making sure you're maximizing seats on a bus because of FTE and all of that. So those adjustments were made primarily from, I would think, just being good stewards, right, financially, versus saying, oh, you only get this much because the budget's not going to support it. That was not the case.
May I ask, Dr. Little, where we are with vacancies with bus drivers? I know there was a lot of work put into getting bus drivers on board and retaining them. I think that's an important part of this conversation in the appropriate number of routes and rides.
Yes, ma'am, great question. We are staffed for 240 positions. I look at it a little bit differently in the sense I look at how many routes do we have on the road and how many extra drivers do we have to fill the vacancies when the staff is out and that sort of thing. So with 182 routes on the road right now, we have 218 staff members, which means I have around 30 that are extra, what we call utility drivers, to cover when people are out. That doesn't mean that's where we're going to stay. We do have a position open right now. I think that is for 15 that we're going to be, I think it closed today. So we'll be doing interviews for a round to get another class in and training. And our goal is to constantly do that every month, evaluate where we're at, what are we adding or doing with our routes, and adjust our staffing based on that, so that we have enough staff to be able to cover when someone is sick or someone is out or someone has a vacation or a family issue, so that we can deal with that appropriately and keep the delays to a minimum.
Thank you very much. That's a significant piece and definitely huge improvement from past years.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
If I could just add real quickly, when it was brought to our attention, those 5 board members, that we didn't have enough bus drivers, and the reason was we weren't paying enough. So we voted and we upped the pay, and because of that, we don't have the vacancies. So when those kinds of situations are brought to us, we are allowed to talk about it only up here. And if it requires extra money to get the people, and we have it, and we did, we upped their salaries. And so now we don't have the vacancies.
And I just want to add one more thing, just because I think transportation is an extremely difficult thing for every district. If you look across the nation, I think it's 81% plus are understaffed when it comes to transportation. If you just look at the strategic growth of any community, even our community, and just look at where our schools are placed, and then look at just the natural growth that's going farther, eastward, westward, right? But as it goes farther out, those routes are going to be longer, and those are the master planning of, there's a lot of discussions around that. So the quality and level of service is a constant conversation. The competitiveness of the industry is a huge challenge, no different than a lot of other areas and other fields. And so it's not taken lightly, but I'm really encouraged to hear, because over a course of 5 years, it's been a serious challenge. And so every year, at the beginning of the year, we're always going to have, and we like the feedback because it allows us to respond to it. But when you start to see those emails or concerns come in day 1, day 2, and then they trickle down pretty quickly, it's a testament to the responsiveness. So I appreciate all the work, but I also appreciate all the families coming forward, because we need to know about them so we can address them.
And sorry, just as the person here who deals with the bus every single day, I will say that I think we're making good progress, but there are still areas that we can improve on. And I think transportation, in terms of a consumer lens, is a very forward-facing, it's very visible in the community, and it can make a big difference when a parent is trying to decide, am I gonna send my kid to a public school or a private school? It's a really big deal. So, I would just say that, and I wanna remind everyone that we are updating our system, because I don't know about y'all, but my Where's the Bus still doesn't tell me where my children are, none of them. So we are updating that system. I think in February, is that when we begin to trickle in the new one, or not at all until next year?
It'll actually go live next school year for all of the functionality parts of it. Yes, we'll be, we begin next week with our beginning piece. All year is training, setting up, building, being ready to go, communicating with the community on what that app is going to look like for them, how to access that, where to find their information. That's all part of what we want to make sure that everyone is comfortable with how that is going before we actually get to the point where we're asking kids to get on the bus and parents to use a totally different app than that. So next school year, day 1, we will be live with that. So
Praise be. Thank you. So I am hopeful that we will continue to improve in our transportation, because I do still think that that's a really, really important component. So.
Superintendent, we have one more here on transportation from a student at Pineview.
2 students from Pineview. So I would like to introduce myself to you guys. My name is Omi Patel, and this is
Dominic Segreto.
And we're both students from Pineview School. Thank you, Dr. Covert, for being here. I don't need the microphone for this. I can just talk verbally. It's not on.
No, it's on.
Oh, it's on. So we wanted to emphasize that recently, as you guys know, Pineview School and many Sarasota County schools are struggling with the reductions being made, And I'd like to emphasize on the bus transportation issue that she brought up earlier. However, we would like to emphasize more on this from a student perspective and as someone who takes the bus regularly after school because of extracurricular activities such as clubs, and I have to take the bus usually at 5 p.m. I've been at Pineview School since 2nd grade, and the bus has been a staple for me. I live in Northport, and I go all the way to Osprey every single commute, every single ride, because it's simply like a necessitation. When you guys say that you had nothing to do with the transportation, it's extremely obscure to me how it was altered just this year and why I wasn't even allowed to go on the bus for the first 2 to 3 weeks of school simply because of this. This affected all of my extracurriculars and made my mom and my dad, who are both working regularly, to try to change their schedules just to pick me up. And it's just something that needs to be reiterated and emphasized upon.
Yeah, I just like to point out, I know you guys are making a lot of reforms to this topic of bus transportation, but you know, it's a multifaceted thing. So it's bus drivers, but it's also a bunch of other factors, obviously like funding and stuff like that. So maybe we need to, you know, deliberate from on a perspective of maybe increasing incentives for bus drivers. I know that's a hard thing to do with county funding, but you know, we need bus drivers. Bus drivers are a necessity in the community, and I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be more reforms taken to encourage bus driver employment. You know, accessibility in the community is a huge issue. Without accessibility, students can't perform to the fullest of their capabilities, and so we need to find a way to reform this. And you guys are making very good progress, but I mean, obviously, if that progress isn't resulting in kids being able to get where they want to go to perform in their community and have the greatest impact in the community, it's clearly not enough. It's not working enough. So,
yeah, we would just like to shed light on this issue. And also, I would like to a little bit elaborate. Many students can't perform or they can't do extracurriculars simply because of this. As Dominic said, I mean, this especially impacted me, and it impacted a lot of my peers at Pineview School. And yeah, we would just like to shed light. Thank you.
I just need a point of clarification. So you're talking after school to be able to get to your extracurricular activities, the busing after school?
So we have clubs after school. For example, I could just give you an example, like speech and debate and law club. They're huge clubs after school that are hosted by Pineview sponsors and teachers. And because of that, high school students can't take transportation, have to wait for transportation at 5 p.m. or they can have their parents pick them up. But obviously for people that are coming from Northport to Osprey just to study and go to such an amazing school, it's really hard for parents to make that commitment, especially with how much they work or how much they dedicate their time to other things. So the issue is that I couldn't go on the bus at 5 p.m. from my extracurricular activities for at least the first 3 weeks of school. And I just wanted to tell you guys a bit about that.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add in that I wholeheartedly agree with you at every level, whether it's every school, whether it's tutorials, academically or extracurricular. It's an important part of your life at school. And I know in the past we've had discussions of potentially trying to establish partnerships with county and city transportations, particularly since they've gone to the smaller vehicles and they aren't the huge long buses. And I know that there was a point when those conversations actually had some life. Is there, Dr. Little or Superintendent Connor, has there been any late thinking or ideas on that piece? It's worth potential, not to say that we as a board would want to give you access to those things, but it's those kinds of partnerships can add layers of opportunity for multiple schools.
So Ms. Rose, just the The superintendent and I have been in our positions, I think, 2 days apart. He became superintendent like 2 days before I became the director of transportation. And honestly, that's the first, that's not been a conversation that I have been a part of in my time here. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen before. I can go back and we can talk with Ms. Price and see if she remembers some of that and pick that back up. But I think that's an opportunity to use business partnerships to maybe offer some alternatives.
Well, it's county governmental partnerships that we've discussed in the past and worth, conversations. Particularly, I think we have good relationship with our county folks and city electeds, and definitely a conversation worth happening. And I know we've had it it's had progress and merit in the past, so I encourage us to look into that.
And I would like to say that really should possibly Dr. Covert, because it's your school, talk and find out and then bring some of the suggestions or whatever to the superintendent and bring it to us and we can talk about it, because we don't know about everything that goes on, good or bad or indifferent, at a school unless it's brought to, really the principal, it should go to the principal if there are issues, and then he can bring it to the superintendent, who will bring it to us. Because I can tell you, if any of this came to me, it goes right to the superintendent, because I will talk with him, but he's the one who will find out what's going on and make it happen. So, because that's not, when I say this, I don't mean it like we don't care or anything, but there are certain things that board members can do and cannot do. So when things are brought to us, we're not going to be doing the investigation. That would be the superintendent and his staff. So it always starts at the school.
Thank you. We'll go back to the budget here. We have a gentleman. State your name, please.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent Board, I've been a teacher in Sarasota County for 32 years, and this has been an interesting year. My question is, I know you had to deal with funding problems, and you made shifts, as you like to call them. But you took a whole bunch of ESOL teachers and ESE teachers and put them in cluster sites, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. And I've watched my comrades come back from other schools and come back into their offices at our school where we are. We're in the 4th week of school. And I don't mean to be impolite to them, but they're looking haggard already. Number 2, TSPs. My goodness, TSPs are the lifeblood of a school. And yet, the best shift that could be divided or decided upon is spreading the TSPs between the schools. It's not working. And even administrators are saying, and when they're in a staff meeting and something goes down, the first thing my principal does is, where's my TSP? He's at another school. Please, please bring them back to the schools. And number 3, this isn't budget, and I'm sorry, I didn't lie that much. I would love to see the old days when you folks took trips out to schools and sat in there for a half a day in the teacher's lounge and let us come talk to you, because you guys don't know. Thank you.
So in terms of some of the regional structures that we've created, and I feel it, when there is support that has been at the schools for a long history, and then there's adjustments, then it becomes a reality that people feel. I want to tell you that is not uncommon, and I'm not to say to justify the reason, but we used a model that we know is working in other school districts. I'm not saying it's better than what we had, but sir, I got that. I'm going to respond now, so I gave you a chance to speak. What I would say is we're going to continue to look at that. One of the things I had our director of IT is I said, I want you to monitor every ticket that is submitted so that we can see what the response rates were compared to last year. So it's going to be really an adjustment to allow, people are going to have to start submitting tickets, or maybe they didn't have to before, so that we can monitor this a little better. But I would tell you, we're also looking at things, especially at the high school level, of creating sort of the geek squad, where you have students who are really good with technology to help with some of the low-level things that wouldn't breach security types of things, but maybe it's helping with the projector, maybe it's helping with some of those types of things, as well as we provide a stipend to staff members who are technology adept and can be available to help troubleshoot some areas as well. So we have things like ITOTs that we currently do that with, but looking at expanding that as well, because that will alleviate some of that as well. So needless to say, I understand we're going to monitor this and we're going to problem solve, and this is not the last iteration of how the structure will be, right? So we have to start somewhere and make adjustments based on need and based on data. And we'll continue to do that, whether it be through ESOL, liaisons, TSPs, where we've gone to a different model than what we're accustomed to. So I want to acknowledge that I hear that, I acknowledge that, and my eyes are on that.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Pete. I'm a student at Northport High School. And sorry to ping pong a bit, but going back to transportation, like I've been, for the last 4 weeks the school year's been going, I've been on a different bus every week, and they change it without telling any of us. And mainly just, sorry, even relating to budget, we really appreciate the work that especially this board is doing, and like we're genuinely thankful for you guys. But we just need more transparency about like way more, even down to the budget, down to staffing, like bus drivers, everything. We would be not as, I guess, agitated about everything if we were just told about it as it was happening. And I don't mean locked away on a website somewhere. I just mean front and center, so that that information could be accessible to us, the people. And it might placate us a little bit more. That's it.
Hello. My dad actually taught with Mr. Marsh for 40 years ago. My mom was a teacher and an assistant principal at Sarasota Middle School. I think Irene Lynch. My sister works at Tatum Ridge. My whole family are all educators. I have 2 kids, very blessed. One is at Pineview and one is at Sky Ranch. So they're actually getting the best of both worlds. I'm super excited for that. They went to Tatum Ridge last year. I used to work in management in the restaurant business, and when I needed to cut labor, I never cut the server because they made the money. I cut the higher end hostess. So where did you cut? In the higher end, in the landings, and the people that don't actually support the little children? Where did you cut there? Because you cut the behavior, you cut the literacy coaches, and guess who has to do that? Like, who has to account for that? My kids' teachers. All of the teachers in Sarasota County have to do more. They are paid what 49th in the school, we're 50th in pay. They have to do more. Where did you cut? Who's the big guy in the landings that you could have cut that might have helped? Mental health is huge right now, and behavior is where we cut. We're talking about school shootings and all sorts of different things. These are the kids that are going to grow up and do this. So where are we cutting instead of affecting our teachers? Because our teachers don't need this. I don't need to spend $1,000 on their Amazon wish list because they can't afford to buy things for our kids. It's wrong.
Thank you for the question. So to sum it up, what did we cut at the landings? What did we cut at central office? And I want to say that is a priority and was a priority during this process. So when you look at, here's the sheer mathematics of it. So why you feel at the schools, right? You have 3,000 instructional staff. There are 124 district staff that are funded on the general fund. And then we have additional administrators on other funding sources. But when you talk about general fund, which is what we're talking about in relation to financial adjustments, 124 district administrators. So we took a 10% cut at the district. So over, I think, 13 positions. If you look at it, they're actually listed in the narrative as well. So we have all 13 out there because I know that that has been a question. If everyone needs to feel the cut, right? It shouldn't just be the schools. It shouldn't just be the central office. So those cuts were at 10% at central office positions, district administrators, I would call them. Then you have what's called classified position. Those are your non-instructional support positions, and then your instructional support positions. And then it's differentiated by school-based versus district-based because we have instructional personnel that are at the district, our program specialists. In each of those categories, school-based, instructional, classified, and administrative, so those are your principals and assistant principals, it was a 4% reduction when you take the numbers. Now, 4% of 3,000 sheer number is going to be more, right? 10% of 120 doesn't seem as much when you talk about 4% of 3,000. And so it seems like there's an imbalance there, but percentage-wise, proportionately, that was the basis for those cuts. So the district positions, the district administrated, what is classified on the books in the budget, was a 10% cut compared to a 4% cut on all the other classifications. The fact is there's just more of those, and that's where it should be. We should have more support at the schools. That's why they're there. But when you're making those cuts, I could cut every administrator. We couldn't function. There are things we have to do. I understand that there's an understanding that nothing's happening at the landings, no central office district administrators, but the fact is there's a lot of important work that is happening there. And even if you cut all of them, you know, it wouldn't have touched the surface really of what had to take place over the summer. So, but I just want to say there was that at top of mind when making those decisions. And I know it's not always visible. That's why I tried to spell it out very clearly in the narrative. So you can get those positions specifically there.
If I could just add to that quickly, we are absolutely now seeing the consequence of decades of underfunding our school district. And unfortunately, now we are feeling it. And that's why I'm so passionate about advocating for equitable and sustainable funding. ESSER dollars are great, but they're not sustainable. We're time limited. And what we saw when we have those positions they are impactful and they are important, and we know that. But at the end of the day, if we continue to elect people who will underfund public education, we will continue to feel that pain. And I did also want to point out that I understand that there is this perception that not enough district level staff was cut, and I hear that. I'm very much like a small government kind of person, but here's the truth of the matter. Our district managed schools outperform our charter partners by a fairly large margin, and if we did not have district level staff to help administer our school district, we would essentially just be a group of charter schools, right? Each doing our own thing. So there is value to having that centralized staff that helps guide the mission and the vision and help our teachers enact that vision and mission. So I see value in district level staff. I think it is important. But I want to acknowledge that we are all feeling the pain of these cuts right now, and we will continue to feel them unless we do something different, period.
I want to add a couple different things. I think that, and you mentioned this before, and so when we went through this process, a couple things have happened over the last course of a couple years, is I believe that there were a myriad of systems that were broken or were not in place. And I'm not a big fan. I've always said it, like, protect the classroom. We don't want heavy bloat in the administration. Philosophically, I 100% agree with that. I think everyone up here 100% agrees with that. I also saw, and I think some of other board members could agree with this, there were areas that were very much fractured. We talked about ESE, we talked about ESOL, like areas that from the district level and even from the data aggregate level were not being addressed at all. And so that required some system changes, and that was at the administrative level. Now, we put forward reading coaches, a number of things that I was very excited about, and then we had to make some shifts this year. And so I know at least my conversation with the superintendent, I know we've had these in a public conversation, was with these changes, some areas, they're more targeted. I think there were areas that maybe they don't necessarily, their current scores illustrate across the board much stronger support when it comes to reading proficiency. So those reading coaches, because I say reading is the title itself shifts, so I don't want to get rid of any of them. And ultimately, I have to leave it to the superintendent and then their staff to execute on those things. My question was, how are we going to monitor that so that we don't see a drop? Because we have seen things move along in a way that I have not seen in a couple of years. And that is upon us as a board member, to hold that accountability and have that frequency of questioning, of saying, whether we're talking about transportation, whether we're talking about reading, we're talking about ESE, all those areas, because there were shifts that had to happen. But sometimes in any organization, and I'm not it's hard, change is hard, and I don't take it lightly, because I was here shortly after the 2008 change, where everyone had to take on a number of different positions, and it was probably a decade until, and I know you guys were working it, so that everyone absorbed those positions. Those fluctuations happen, and they're tough, and I as a private sector person, I felt it too, so I get it. The full purpose of our goal is to ensure that we're, again, supporting the main mission, the level of support, and then ensuring that our superintendent, we're holding that person accountable to ensure we're not dropping the ball in any of those areas, and you have to have functions that monitor them. And so what I'm saying to you is not any surprise to Mr. Connor, because we had this conversation of, okay, now that we've had these changes, particularly this board's talked about reading, ESE and ESOL, major areas that I don't think our district, unfortunately, had been monitoring at the administrative level, that was giving us, that was illustrating actual supportive, actual substantive changes. And I'm happy to report that I think we're seeing that trajectory change. So that shift made it all the more nerve-wracking for us to say, oh no, what are we gonna do? So it is a constant evaluation, and it's up to us to hold the superintendent, and then ultimately him to hold his staff accountable to it. And so the feedback's very valuable, but I think it's important to understand that we are all focused and that mission doesn't change, and that it allows us to be better and more prescriptive to where the need is. I hope that makes sense.
I just want to, I agree that we should be at schools more. I try to do it as much as I can to be out in the field, because the information that I get from teachers and from parents is significantly more valuable to me when I'm making an assessment of how I'm going to cast a vote. When I really listen to the community and I listen to the people that are the boots on the ground. So I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. But I think Mrs. Barker hit the nail on the head, that what happened here, and I think most of you have seen my 5 years in this process, I have been sounding the alarm as much as I possibly could in an environment on the dais that was not part of that conversation. It was, we just disagreed for a whole bunch of reasons, and a lot of it can be attributed to the chaos that I talked about before. But here is the reality. When you're facing budget cuts in an underfunded environment, there are just no good solutions. They don't exist. And I have to go one step further in the conversation around administration, because this is something that I pay very, very close attention to. I have conversations about operations, not classroom, but I'll tell you where we're exceeding, honestly, is in the classroom environment, in the scores, in the places that we still have a lot of work to do in Title I. I'm definitely going to say that, but I've seen the superintendent's administrative staff around academic achievement step up to the third or fourth power. It is powerful of what they've been able to accomplish, and I hear that from teachers. I'm not just using it from I hear it from teachers. Are they stressed out? Yes. Is the pedal to the metal? Often, yes, because that's what we're here for, is student achievement and student outcome. So I can't empathize enough with how painful it is to be a school teacher, because they do it for the love of the kids. I know that's step one. And then when they're given great ideas and suggestions from the superintendent's academic staff, and they see that it works and it can work, and they apply even more because they want to do right by the kids. So it's a balance. There's no good answer from the superintendent's point of view, because he's trying really hard with a top quality team to improve the scores and student outcomes. I promise you, I see it every single day, and I'm close to I stay listening to the results. So I understand your pain, I empathize, I live with it every single day. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed with what's the right answer. So I can't even imagine what the superintendent feels. But I just want you to know that there are people that hear you, listen to you, and are trying the very best they can to do the right thing by our students.
I just want to say that I most certainly understand what you are saying, because the majority of my career was at Southside Elementary School. And at one time, we had 850 kids, no AP, just me and the principal as the school counselor. Then Miss Rose came as, for the first time we ever had, a behavior person. And I just was like, oh, thank God, I have some help. But what do you think when we were able to hire? It just seems like as soon as we hire and we have staff and we feel like we're doing, then we have a budget cut. And I don't know if you remember when we went through years where teachers, we didn't get a raise. We might have got a $1,000 bonus from the board. So I understand. And I lost one of my positions, and I went back to Southside as a counselor. So I understand what that pain feels like and how it affects kids and how you're working. Because I mean, there would be times I couldn't get my paperwork done till 7, 8 o'clock at night. So I understand, and I take that all very, very seriously. But right now, I think we're trying to do the best we can with what we got, but we don't always have enough of the money, and I think we're trying to fill it all in, and all we can do is advocate for more and listen to you. So.
Thank you. We have time for just a few more questions. This lady here has been very patient, so we'll.
I've been trying to write down comments from the last few comments, so if I seem all over the place, I apologize. First, thank you all for coming to South County. We greatly appreciate it. My name's Jamie Cavanis. I'm actually a literacy interventionist at Cranberry. So I understand a lot of the community's concern with some of the cuts, especially when it comes to literacy and our scores, because it's not good. And I know we just barely got that A. And I am worried about what the outlook will be for next year, considering the cuts that we have seen. We can talk budget all day, but the fact is we can't change it. And I keep hearing you guys talk about evaluating the situation, looking at data, but my master's was in program evaluation, and you can't just look at the data. These are humans. There's a bigger picture, and we can't just look at the data to see what's really going on. We need you in our schools. I have not once seen most of you in our schools. I've maybe seen one or two of you just walking through the hallways, but you've really got to spend time in the schools, volunteer, have your friends go volunteer to see what's happening, spend time in the classrooms, talk to the teachers. I've never once gotten to talk to any of you personally. Same with the rest of my staff. Most are too scared to even come to these things, or they don't feel like their voice is going to be heard. So that's why I came, because I want them to be heard and understood. And I think it's time we start thinking outside of the box. Forget about the budget. Well, we can't forget about the data. We need to keep the data in mind, but bring some of your educators to the table. I don't need to be paid, but I have a voice, I have ideas. I know there's other people in the district who also feel the same way. And I think if we get more stakeholders involved from different avenues and different parts of our community, I think we can start to see results in a different way.
Thank you.
I'll just say I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you for your comments. And I'm really excited about our STAC committee. We have a superintendent teacher advisory that has over 25 teachers involved from various regions geographically across the county and in different areas from ESE and different content areas. And that's one way that I try to stay, besides walking classrooms and hearing directly from teachers, but getting them together regularly to talk about the realities. And we've got some really good things planned that are the ideas of teachers, brought by teachers, thought by teachers, and will be implemented. And I think you'll be excited about some of the things, because you're right, it's not about just the numbers. There's a qualitative aspect of this. There is a human aspect to this. And that is the hardest thing as a superintendent that has to look at the numbers and make some very tough decisions. I also have to make sure that the decisions made have an impact on human lives, on the morale, and all of those things. And those things are very tough, and they weigh heavily on the leadership team that talks about this every single day. And so I just want you to know that truly is a big aspect of that. And we talk about, one of the things we're focused on as an administrative staff this year is the heart of leadership. All of our principals, our assistant principals, our district administrators, really focusing on all the qualitative aspects of leading. And it's not just pushing initiatives, it's people-driven. And I want you to know we're focused on that. Thank you.
Superintendent, we have another question back here for you.
Good evening, Superintendent and board members. Thank you for coming out and visiting Wilkinson. I am a Wilkinson Wildcat mom. We have been in discussion about your budget meeting the past few meetings over the past year, and I have questioned on some of the things that you've touched on tonight. The ESC programs, the shortage in the reading and literacy, how we can be more resilient. And I've gotten answers from all of you. You've come out and visited our school. I've even taken the resiliency training through the Florida School Board that we now offer parent volunteers who are now have more access to our Sarasota County. So thank you for making the website more readable. There have been some rumors that are going around, and I know you asked me to wait till the end. And I did see the In Touch while we were in the meeting, where I can put an inform and ask a question publicly through the website. So thank you for making the website, but I'm here. And there are rumors circulating. I know we've had the data. I know we've looked at the data. I know the budget had room for a brand new STEAM school to open up in Sarasota County. I'm concerned about my school. My 3 children are special needs kids that get amazing services from amazing teachers in a Sarasota County public school. And it's thanks to you guys, all of you that have showed up tonight, because wow, this is quite a turnout. But how can I get answers from the administrators when they don't have answers? And can I get an answer directly from you about the rumors circulating online, publicly, about Wilkinson Elementary possibly losing its funding and closing, and the school board moving their landing center to Wilkinson. Is there any truth in that? Will we get a say in that if it does come to the Hope schools? Do parents that may have a school that's in fear of having charter come in, do we get a say in that in our district? Can we meet with you? How can we help as parents stay informed, have access, and be in touch with the funds that we have, the students we have, the school we have, with you guys and our legislators? Can you share any views and help me out here?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Very articulate, and thank you for sharing in detail. I don't know if you were here at the very beginning. Were you here? So we did touch on, so the board, we're at a stage now where the board will be discussing some options that are coming forth as a district at our Tuesday workshop. It's around the utilization of all of our buildings in the school district. But I'm just going to be very transparent to say there have been planning and conference table conversations with staff about schools like Wilkinson who are in the 50% or below utilization rate right now. Because of the Schools of Hope, I've touched on all that, I won't get into it, but I covered that at the top. So Wilkinson is at the center of our conversations about what do we do with Wilkinson in terms of making sure we protect our district facilities, our schools the best we can, and honestly, I don't want one School of Hope to set up shop in Sarasota County. And we've got to be proactive as best as we can in order to do that, and that will have some very difficult conversations around how we utilize our facilities. I say all of that to, I think Tuesday, I want to give the board an opportunity to discuss that in a public meeting, you know, sunshine and all of that. And that will be forthcoming. So I think a lot of your answers will be answered soon. But in terms of parenting and community engagement around this, absolutely. A timeline will be developed depending on how the results of our conversation on Tuesday. So thank you.
For confirmation,
Yeah.
there is no definite yes or no as of this moment that our school is closing.
That there is no definite. The five people that have all the power for that are right here, and they haven't even had a chance to discuss that yet.
Okay.
If I can say something really quickly, because I appreciate that, and the worst is having rumors and not, especially when it's impacting your family, your children. Certainly, this is the first circumstance, having been on the board for almost 10 years or more, that we've ever dealt with even this potential conversation. And to Mr. Connor's point, the board has not discussed it, have gone over all the details, but certainly there's been this evaluation with just capacity growth, new schools, then add on Schools of Hope. But, and so in the world of social media, but also if staff's working on, I mean, it getting out in the way it is, I hate that because it makes, but I also understand it's just human. I mean, get it. So I don't blame anyone for it. But to reiterate, it is premature that none of us have had a conversation, but I welcome any conversation with you afterwards. To be blunt, I think it's going to give us a public conversation and share that information and that data to have an informed conversation. And going to the point that we were talking about data and then the impact on the end of it, we understand their human lives, and it gives me goosebumps when I say it. There are human lives at every end of every conversation that we have, and I don't take that lightly, and I appreciate you coming today. And so I want you to know you have a seat at the table.
I'm going to just chime into that as well and say that in full transparency, we've been discussing, to my knowledge, individually with the superintendent, the Schools of Hope, and the challenges. But even before that, there's a realm of continuous improvement and maximizing efficiency and dollars and cents in an unfunded environment, underfunded environment, that those conversations aren't just dropping from the sky, at least to this board member. And I've looked at all of that, but I want to throw it back into your court and say that what I saw from the superintendent to parents, to community, to legislators, all of that as we fought back the IB and the ACE programs to make sure that those weren't funded, that was parent, It initially started with the superintendent, but what really got full force was parents and families. And I think actually Sarasota ignited it, and it went across the state, and that's how we were able to hold it back. So if you are feeling frustrated by Schools of Hope, there's a roadmap of how to fix that.
We have time for 2 more questions. We're going to go here and to the young man up there. And I will say this right now, if you haven't done so already, please hit the QR code, put your question in. Every question will be answered and put on the Inform website that was submitted tonight. So please take your time to do that, and then we'll make sure we got everybody. But right now, 2 more questions. We'll start.
Hello, how are y'all doing tonight? So just real quick, as a voter, how can we trust the decisions of the school board, considering that one of our school board members is not elected on the board, and we also have another school board member who sends 2 of their children to a charter school? How are we supposed to respect the decisions that you make if you don't even believe in them yourselves?
So we're gonna move forward and refrain from speaking to each other during this portion of it. But here's what I would say, just as superintendent. And I don't speak on behalf of any individual board member, but what I will say, the reality is this: each of these individuals, in and of themselves, really have no power. All 5 of them together have all the power. So the decision-making body of a school board is what we have here. And so the majority rules, and that's how decisions are made in relation to policy or any other decisions we do. And I think that's an important distinction without getting into individuals and personal things. That's the way we govern as a body, as 5 collective board members.
Thank you. Young man.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dominic DiBenedetto. I am a junior at Northport High School and the vice president of the DeFi Club at Northport. And obviously today we've been talking a lot about the budgeting. We're in a time where unfortunately our county is underfunded, and because of that we've had to make some budgeting cuts. We've been talking a lot about what goes on inside the classrooms, the teachers, and all the other staff that go into learning. But we also have to take into account that not everything happens inside the classroom, and learning is all about the atmosphere that the school creates. And unfortunately, what's been happening recently, especially with the budget cuts, we've lost funding for some of our security personnel, and we've had to be cut down on even that. And this creates an ecosystem where our hallways are kind of unregulated, especially our bathroom situation has been really just terrible. And I actually have some data for you guys that I think you'll find kind of frightening. We've been conducting a survey. So far we have over 100 responses from the end of last year to where we are right now. And what we've gotten back is that 61% of the time that students go to the bathroom, there are either students in there vaping or talking about vaping. And 75% of students feel that the bathrooms are unsafe. Now, we know that it's hard to fit extra security personnel into the budget, but with our school, such a large school like Northport, where we have a campus so spread out as an open campus, it is just a necessity that we have these kind of personnel. Now, we've heard that Charlotte County has implemented such volunteers who are either ex-military or ex-law enforcement overall to actually assist them with just keeping the bathrooms organized, having somebody monitor the hallways, and I'm just confused as why we do not have these at our schools. It creates a lot of times students are afraid to go to the bathrooms. Sometimes there's been cases where students have developed UTIs because they've had to hold it all day, even after school. Bathrooms shut at 2 p.m. If you have a long bus ride home, you just gotta hold it. And a lot of times students try to get a teacher to let them go to the bathrooms in the office because it's unsafe. Bathrooms are destroyed, people are in there vaping, they're in the general area, they're in the stalls just sitting in there doing whatever. The boys' bathrooms only have 2 stalls, one big one and one little one, and there's 4 people in each. I don't even know how you fit 4 people into little stalls, but they make it work. Even when we do have security sometimes holding the door, this is the biggest concern. We have security guards occasionally, let me stress that, occasionally, holding those doors, and they'll be holding it open, and right around there's a little corner right there, and we still have 3 people vaping in there. Students can't get away with this anymore, and something needs to be taken, some sort of action needs to be taken.
To add on to what Dom said, he mentioned the lack of SROs and just security in general in schools, but as you said, you've made a lot of shifts, not necessarily layoffs, but certain schools get more, certain schools get less due to necessity, right? But what I want to know is seeing like how this problem is very well documented, especially in a bigger school like Northport, wouldn't higher security be a priority that you guys would take care of? And so we just wanted confirmation that you guys are actually caring about our security needs and not just big things like school grade, but down to the little things like student behavior. And the recent cuts towards ESE and behavioral psychology, like people placed in schools, it's kind of making all of us uncertain about our own safety.
All right, thank you so much. So I do.
It's about the same thing. It's
Okay.
it's about the security issue is, it's more about what I see. More security guards. Like there's only like 2, what are the stations that let people get into school? That's the metal detectors. There's only like 2 of them in the whole school, and takes people about like 30 minutes to get into the school. Like I've seen it. Our bus, we take the same bus. It used to be 7 a.m. We get in class 7:30. No time to eat, no time to do anything like that. And I think that having more security, people like that, would make it easier and more efficient to get people into the school, and not just to officiate the bathrooms, which I've seen it. I've been in there. I've had to throw people, like 4 people out the way just so I can do my business. And I think more security and more of official security that has more of a background in officiating students around would both help the bathroom situations and getting kids into the school so they're not tardy in the morning. A lot of teachers aren't very lenient about that in the morning, despite the fact that maybe it takes about 20, 30 minutes to just get into the metal detectors. So if we had more metal detectors, more security people, then it might split that even in half, just that type of thing.
Thank you. I will say this, I appreciate the input on security, right? So one, I want to be clear around, because I know it can be very easy to think every issue is a budget issue, and that is not necessarily always the case. In terms of safety and security, the only adjustments made in personnel there were really the second shift. And you probably didn't even realize that, but due to legislation last year, which required basically a night shift, a second shift of SROs to be on campus and security presence, that was the only thing affected from a safety and security piece. During the day, you have a number of security officers and a number of SROs that has not changed over the years. So I would like to look at Northport, and what I'll do as a follow-up, just to specifically see what is the number of allocations you have, how are they deploying OpenGate? It sounds like 2 may be a constraint. There may need to be a third. I know Riverview has 4. So it all depends on implementation is what I'm hearing here that I would want to dig into. But in terms of budget cuts, there should be no compromise in safety and security related to that, to the day-to-day. So if that's the case occurring at Northport, I will have to take a look as to why that is. So I appreciate you bringing that to light. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So we've gone over quite a bit of time here. I will say that again, please submit your questions on this QR code. Every question will be answered. It'll be on the Inform site, along with this webinar that we've done today. I'd also like to invite you to our next Coffee with Connor on September 30th at 10 o'clock at the Betty Johnson Library, where the superintendent will be there to talk casually with you all if you'd like to ask him questions. Again, I can't speak for the board, but I'd like to thank you all very much for being here tonight, Mr. Superintendent, staff for being here, and most importantly, for you all, because without you, we don't exist. So thank you for being here.